Okay, so you want to own a food truck fleet. Your logo wrapped across 5, 6, 10 trucks, parked at every festival in town on the same Saturday. A local news segment calling you the fleet owner behind that taco truck everyone's obsessed with. Maybe a framed photo in your commissary office of the day you bought truck number 3 that nobody in the kitchen ever actually looks at. Here's what's actually going on underneath that idea. A single food truck, run well, can clear a genuinely healthy 15 to 25% net margin. Here's the part that makes almost no sense at first. Building a fleet doesn't multiply that margin. It multiplies every fixed cost you have: commissary rent, insurance, permits, staff, across every truck and, often, every city you operate in. More trucks should mean more money. Very often, it just means more overhead running at the exact same thin margin, 5 times over. So, why does anyone do this? Brand recognition across an entire city, leverage to book the biggest festivals and corporate catering contracts a single truck could never land, and media attention that turns into free marketing. That's the honest, partial answer. What it costs to get there is where things get complicated fast. First, you need permission, and not from one office, but potentially a different combination in every single city your fleet operates in. Your local health department has to approve a commissary agreement and issue a mobile food permit for every truck, individually. Separately, a city's transportation or vending authority controls where you're allowed to park, sell, and idle, and in a genuine multi-city fleet, none of those rules are the same twice. A single, well-equipped food truck routinely runs $100,000 to $150,000 all in once you count the vehicle, kitchen equipment, permits, branding, and working capital. Now multiply that across even a modest fleet of 4 or 5 trucks, and you're looking at $500,000 to over $750,000 in capital before a single truck has sold a single taco. And here's a rule most people don't know about. In New York City, the total number of citywide mobile food vending permits has been capped for decades at roughly 3,100 year-round permits, plus 1,000 seasonal ones. The official fee for one is $200. The real price, paid to a permit holder on the black market because the official waiting list hasn't meaningfully moved in years, regularly runs $15,000 to $25,000 for a single permit, for a single truck. You also need people, real, specific, often government-mandated people, multiplied across every unit in your fleet. Most jurisdictions require an individual food handler certification for whoever's actually cooking, a fire marshal-approved propane and suppression inspection per truck, and in cities like New York, a personal supervisory license that has to be held by an actual human being before a company can even apply for a full-term permit at all. So that's the entry fee just to legally exist as a fleet. Now let's talk about the actual product, the trucks themselves, because here you face a real fork in the road. A converted step van built out by a custom fabrication shop, or a purpose-built trailer towed behind a separate vehicle. And here's the first trap. The $50,000 food truck prices you see in online listings are almost never what fleet operators actually pay. Used trucks routinely need $10,000 to $20,000 in health code retrofits and mechanical repairs before they'll pass inspection, and that's before wraps, POS hardware, and the equipment needed to bring a used kitchen up to your brand's actual menu. Move from a single used truck to a full custom-built fleet vehicle, and the numbers get considerably more painful. A brand new, professionally built truck runs $75,000 to $200,000 depending on size and equipment, with lead times of 12 to 16 weeks, meaning a growing fleet is often paying full price for capacity that won't even exist for 4 months. Here's where the first real decision point shows up. Do you buy your fleet vehicles outright, or do you finance them the way most growing fleets actually do? A bare-bones commissary arrangement gets you parking, water, and waste disposal for $400 to $1,500 a month per truck, the equivalent of the cheapest possible lease. A full-service commissary adds shared equipment, cold storage, and administrative support for a noticeably higher monthly rate. More support, meaningfully more expensive, especially once you're paying that rate across an entire fleet instead of one truck. There's also a financing trick some growing fleets lean on: selling a truck to an equipment finance company for a lump sum of cash, then immediately leasing it back to keep operating it. It's completely legal, extremely common as fleets scale past 3 or 4 vehicles, and it can free up real capital for the next truck. It also means a meaningful chunk of your fleet may not actually be yours anymore, just financed under a different name. So now you've got trucks, commissary access, and permits in hand. Time to pick a model because food truck fleet isn't one business, it's at least three completely different ones. The single brand owned fleet is the model most people picture. You personally own every truck, hire every crew, and run every route yourself. It gives you total control and, if it works, the entire margin. It also means every single cost on this list is entirely on you, multiplied by however many trucks you're running. Then there's the franchise fleet model, where you sell the right to operate a truck under your brand to independent owner-operators who buy their own vehicle, pay you an upfront fee, and hand over an ongoing royalty on their sales. You get scale without owning every vehicle in exchange for giving up direct control of daily operations. And there's the events and catering-only fleet, which skips daily street parking entirely and books exclusively through festivals, weddings, and corporate contracts. Fewer permit headaches day to day, but your entire revenue depends on a booking calendar that can go quiet for weeks at a time in the off-season. This brings us to one of the strangest hidden assets in the entire industry, the permit itself, treated as a tradable commodity completely separate from the truck it's attached to. Vendors in cities like New York routinely pay a monthly rent of several hundred to several $1,000s just to lease someone else's permit, on top of everything else, because the legal path to getting their own can take over a decade on a waiting list that barely moves. Now let's get into the costs that actually eat your revenue every single day. This is where most people's mental math falls apart. Industry data suggests the average truck needs to sell somewhere between 180 and 350 meals a month just to cover its base commissary rent and fixed overhead before a single dollar counts as profit. Labor is the single biggest recurring cost, and it multiplies fast across a fleet. A well-staffed truck typically runs 2 people per shift, and once you factor in payroll taxes and workers' compensation, that's commonly $3,000 to $5,000 a month per truck, meaning a 5-truck fleet can be carrying $20,000 or more in monthly labor before a single ingredient is purchased. And larger trucks bring their own wrinkle almost nobody accounts for early. Vehicles above a certain weight threshold require a driver with a commercial license just to move the truck between locations, adding a specific, harder-to-fill staffing requirement that a single small trailer simply doesn't have. Food is the second biggest cost, typically running 25 to 35% of revenue, and it's where volatility lives. Beef, seafood, and cooking oil all move on commodity cycles completely outside your control. Fleet operators often try to lock in savings through centralized, bulk purchase contracts across every truck at once, and when it works, it's a real efficiency advantage. But it also means that if wholesale prices move against that contract, the damage isn't contained to one truck's food cost. It's baked into every single truck in the fleet simultaneously. One food truck business tried something an investor openly said wouldn't work and got vindicated in spectacular fashion. When the founders of Cousins Maine Lobster pitched their single lobster roll truck on national television in 2012, one investor passed, saying flatly that he didn't see the food truck model as scalable enough to justify the valuation. That single truck became a fleet, then a nationwide franchise system generating over $1 billion in system-wide sales across more than 85 locations. Maintenance across a fleet is a numbers game nobody escapes. A single generator or engine failure can take one truck fully offline for days while it's earning exactly $0, and statistically, across a fleet of 5 or more trucks running daily, something is almost always down, which is why serious fleet operators budget real reserve capacity just to cover it. Maintenance and propane and refrigeration systems are their own recurring gulf. Fire marshal-mandated propane inspections happen on a fixed schedule per truck, refrigeration compressors eventually fail without warning, and every one of those repairs is a per-unit cost that a single truck operator pays once and a fleet operator pays over and over, on a rotating basis, all year long. Then there's insurance, commercial auto coverage plus general liability, price per vehicle, stacking directly with the size of your fleet rather than getting meaningfully cheaper per truck as you scale. And like every corner of the food business, fleet operators chase savings in places that look almost comically small on their own, trimming portion sizes by a fraction of an ounce, Renegotiating napkin and to-go container counts, trivial per transaction, but multiplied across 5 trucks doing hundreds of transactions a day, it adds up to real money by the end of the season. So, that's the cost side. Now, let's talk about how you actually make money back, because this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. A mature fleet has one advantage a single truck never will: the ability to move capacity around like pieces on a board. Routing trucks toward whichever event, neighborhood, or corporate lunch contract is producing the best numbers that week, based on real sales data from every other truck in the system. App-based pre-ordering pushes this further, steering customers toward higher-margin combo items, cutting down wasted prep time at a truck's tiny window, and collecting exactly the kind of ordering data a single independent truck rarely has the volume to make useful at all. The event economics behind all of this are brutal in their own way. Event organizers commonly take 10 to 15% of a truck's total sales just for the right to set up, and that figure can run as high as 40% at the biggest, highest traffic festivals, a cut that comes straight off the top before a single operating cost is paid. Beneath the daily street sales, ancillary revenue matters more for a fleet than people assume. Private catering contracts and corporate lunch programs both pay a predictable, negotiated rate instead of relying on whoever happens to walk by, and for operators running a franchise model, ongoing royalty income from other people's trucks becomes its own separate, and often more scalable, revenue stream. But here's the part almost nobody outside the industry understands, and it's the single most important structural fact in the entire business. Once a fleet brand has real proof of concept, the most profitable version of the business often isn't selling more food from more trucks you personally own. It's selling the right to use your brand and your playbook to someone else who's willing to buy their own truck. Cousins Maine Lobster's franchise structure charges new operators $250,000 to $350,000 for the right to run a single branded truck, plus an 8% ongoing royalty on every sale that truck makes, for the rest of the time that franchisee operates it, whether the founders ever touch that truck's food again or not. In a very real sense, a mature food truck fleet with a strong enough brand stops being primarily a food business and becomes a licensing business that happens to sell lobster rolls or tacos or barbecue as the product that justifies the fee. The trucks on the street are the marketing. The franchise fee and the royalty are the business. Now, for the volatility. Even well-run trucks report net margins landing anywhere from 15 to 25% in a strong year down to essentially break-even in a week one, a wider swing than most brick-and-mortar restaurants see, because so much of a truck's revenue depends on weather, foot traffic, and event bookings that can vanish with almost no warning. And a fleet doesn't average that volatility away the way people assume it will. If your busiest events all fall on the same rainy Saturday, or the same commodity spike hits every truck's menu at once, the fleet doesn't smooth the risk out. It just multiplies the same bad day across every single unit you own. Zoom is the clearest cautionary tale of what happens when fleet ambition outruns structural discipline. The company raised roughly $450 million to build a custom-engineered delivery fleet with pizza ovens baking food inside the trucks in real time, essentially trying to solve two separate, brutally capital-intensive problems: food automation and custom vehicle manufacturing, at exactly the same time. The company burned through nearly all of it and shut down. Ambition and funding didn't protect it from a structural bet that was simply too complicated to execute at scale. Cancellations pile onto this volatility in a way few first-time fleet owners appreciate. A rained-out festival, or a last-minute permit denial on the day of a booked event, leaves a fully stocked, fully staffed truck with 0 customers and a full tank of already purchased inventory, a total loss that a single truck operator absorbs once, and a multi-truck fleet can absorb across several vehicles on the exact same unlucky day. Environmental regulation is the newest volatility factor on the list. A growing number of cities are restricting diesel generator use and extended vehicle idling on public streets, pushing fleet operators toward costlier battery or electric hybrid power systems, a mandated retrofit that has to be repeated across every single truck in the fleet, not just one. So, let's run 2 scenarios. In the optimistic one, you build a proven single truck concept, prove out the unit economics for real, then scale through franchising the way Cousin's Maine Lobster did, collecting fees and royalties from other people's capital instead of financing every new truck yourself. In the realistic one, you overextend on custom-built capacity before you've proven a single truck can consistently turn a profit, the way Zum did at a much larger scale, carrying fixed costs across a fleet that was never actually validated at the unit level in the first place. So, if you still want to own a food truck fleet, understand exactly what you're actually buying. Not really a collection of kitchens on wheels. What you're buying is a stack of near-identical, thin-margin businesses, multiplied by however many trucks you're willing to finance, one that only turns into real wealth the moment you stop selling the food yourself and start selling other people the right to sell it for you.